The morning I found the letter taped to my front door. I was holding a basket of fresh eggs and wondering if my Rhode Island Reds were plotting something, because they had been suspiciously quiet all week. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, and had the Meadowbrook HOA seal pressed into the wax like we were living in some kind of medieval fiefdom instead of a suburb outside Charlotte, North Carolina. I set the egg basket down on the porch railing and tore it open, already feeling my blood pressure rising. Nothing good ever came from these people. Sure enough, the letter was a formal cease and desist order. In the most passive-aggressive legal language possible, it informed me that my chicken coop was in violation of Article 7, Section 3 of the HOA bylaws, which apparently prohibited farm animals, livestock, or structures designed to house such creatures within the community. I had 30 days to remove it or face daily fines of $500. I stood there reading it 3 times, letting the words sink in. I had lived in this house for 6 years. I had built the chicken coop 4 years ago. Not once had anyone said a single word about it. The coop sat in my backyard, barely visible from the street, painted the same sage green as my house trim with a neat little run attached. My 6 chickens were quieter than most people's dogs, cleaner than teenagers, and they gave me fresh eggs every single day. The signature at the bottom made everything click into place. Linda Pemberton, HOA president. Of course, Linda had moved into the neighborhood about 8 months ago, bought the biggest house on the hill, and immediately ran for HOA president when old Mr. Chen stepped down. She won by default, because nobody else wanted the job, and she had been making everyone's life miserable ever since. She was in her late 40s, had that specific haircut that screamed, "I want to speak to your manager," and wore athleisure outfits that cost more than my monthly grocery bill despite never actually exercising. I walked around to my backyard, past the garden where my tomatoes were just starting to ripen, and looked at the coop. It was a beautiful structure, honestly. I had spent 3 weekends building it from scratch, watching YouTube videos and measuring everything twice. The chickens were pecking around happily, and Henrietta, my oldest hen, gave me that judging look she always did when I showed up without treats. "Sorry, girl," I said, reaching through the wire to scratch her head. "Apparently, we are causing a disturbance." My phone rang. It was my neighbor, Pete Russo, calling from next door. I could see him standing on his deck, waving at me. "Did you get one too?" he asked when I picked up. "Get what?" "A letter. Linda sent me one about my garden shed being 3 inches too close to the property line. Says I have to move it or tear it down." I walked over to the fence separating our yards. Pete was a good guy, a retired firefighter who spent his days woodworking and growing vegetables that he handed out to half the neighborhood. His shed had been there for a decade. "She sent me something about my chickens," I said, holding up the letter. Pete shook his head. "She is on a rampage." My wife ran into her at the grocery store last week, and Linda spent 20 minutes complaining about how the neighborhood is going downhill because people are not maintaining proper standards. She specifically mentioned your coop, said it makes the area look rural and trashy. "Rural and trashy," I repeated. "I have 6 chickens in a backyard that is bigger than some parks. They are not exactly roaming the streets causing chaos. You know what this is really about, right?" Pete leaned against the fence. "Her house is on Sycamore Court. She can see your backyard if she stands on her 2nd-floor balcony and uses binoculars, which I am pretty sure she does. My wife saw her out there with them last Tuesday, sweeping the area like she is running surveillance." I felt my jaw clench. "So she is looking for violations." "Creating them, more like. Half this stuff has been here for years. She is trying to make her mark, show everyone she is in charge. power trip. We talked for a few more minutes before Pete had to go meet his wife for lunch. I went back inside my house, reading the letter again more carefully this time. The language was very specific, citing bylaws and ordinances, threatening legal action. Someone had clearly helped her draft this. Probably the HOA lawyer that they kept on retainer for exactly this kind of harassment. I pulled out my own copy of the HOA bylaws, the massive binder they had given me when I bought the house. It took me 20 minutes to find Article 7, Section 3. Pete was right. The rule was there technically, but there was something else too. A grandfather clause in Article 2 that stated any structure or modification made before 2020 and not challenged within 6 months was considered approved. My Coop was built in 2021, so that did not help me. But the rule itself had some interesting loopholes. It prohibited farm animals and livestock. Chickens, I had learned years ago when researching this exact issue, were classified as poultry in North Carolina law, and in many municipalities, they were considered pets rather than livestock if kept under a certain number and not for commercial purposes. I spent the rest of the afternoon researching. The Meadowbrook HOA bylaws deferred to local ordinances when their own rules were vague. The Charlotte area had actually revised its poultry rules 3 years ago, specifically allowing backyard chickens under certain conditions. No roosters, limit of 10 birds, certain coop standards for sanitation and distance from neighboring houses. I met every single requirement. By evening, I had a plan. I drafted a response letter citing the local ordinances, the classification of chickens as pets rather than livestock, and requesting a hearing before the HOA board. I sent it certified mail the next morning. Linda called me that afternoon. I was at work, managing the warehouse for a plumbing supply company, when my phone lit up with an unknown number. "This is Ethan Davis," I answered. "Mr. Davis, this is Linda Pemberton from the Meadowbrook HOA." Her voice was sharp, clipped, like she was talking to someone particularly stupid. "I received your letter. That was fast. I stopped by the post office. I am calling to inform you that your request for a hearing is denied. The bylaws are clear, and there is no ambiguity here. You have farm animals on your property, and they must be removed." I switched the phone to my other ear, stepping away from the noise of the forklift. "Actually, Linda, there is quite a bit of ambiguity. Chickens are not classified as farm animals or livestock under local law when kept in the manner I keep them. They are pets. The HOA bylaws defer to local ordinances. That is your interpretation. It is the law's interpretation. I am happy to present my case to the full board." There was a long pause. I could practically hear her grinding her teeth. "Fine. The next board meeting is in 3 weeks. You will have 5 minutes to present, but I am telling you now this decision is final. We will see about that." She hung up without saying goodbye. I went back to work feeling pretty good about myself. I had the law on my side, a reasonable argument, and 3 weeks to prepare. What could go wrong? The answer came 4 days later when I got home from work to find a notice posted on my front door. An inspection had been scheduled for my property. The HOA was sending someone to evaluate the coop for health and safety violations. The inspection was set for the next afternoon, and my presence was not required. I called Pete immediately. "Can they do that? Just come into my yard without permission? Check your HOA agreement. Most of them have a clause that allows inspections with 24 hours notice. It is technically your property, but you signed away certain rights when you bought into the community." He was right. I found it buried in the documentation. Any property that was subject to a complaint or violation notice could be inspected by HOA representatives with 1 day's notice. I could refuse entry, but that would result in automatic fines and would be considered an admission of guilt. I took the next day off work. If they were coming to inspect, I was going to be there to make sure they did not fabricate anything. I spent the morning cleaning the coop until it gleamed, raking the run, and making sure every single detail met the standards I had researched. Linda showed up at 2 in the afternoon with 2 other people. One was a man in his 30s wearing a polo shirt with an HOA logo embroidered on it. The other was a woman about Linda's age, carrying a clipboard and wearing an expression that suggested she had smelled something terrible. "Mr. Davis," Linda said, not offering to shake hands. "This is Mark Chen, our HOA compliance officer, and Deborah Walsh, board secretary. We are here to inspect your structure, the chicken coop." The illegal structure, yes. I led them around to the backyard, watching as they took photos and made notes. Mark actually seemed reasonable, checking measurements and looking at the construction with what appeared to be professional interest. Deborah just wrinkled her nose and kept her distance, like the chickens might attack. "The structure itself is well built," Mark said, surprising me. "Meets all the basic construction standards. Clean, no obvious health hazards, proper ventilation." Linda shot him a look that could have melted steel. "What about the odor?" "What odor?" I asked. "I clean the coop 3 times a week. You cannot smell anything from beyond the property line." Deborah made a show of sniffing. "I definitely smell something." "That is called fresh air and pine shavings," I said. "My whole system is cleaner than most people's garbage cans." They spent 20 more minutes poking around, taking more photos and muttering to each other. Linda kept trying to find something wrong, pointing out imaginary issues that Mark would gently correct. The chickens, sensing the hostile energy, had retreated to the far corner of the run and were making soft, worried sounds. Finally, they left. Linda stopped at my back door and turned to face me. "You will receive our report within a week. I expect you to comply with the original directive." "I will see you at the board meeting," I replied. After they left, Pete came over with 2 beers. We sat on my back deck, watching the chickens slowly come back out to investigate their coop like it might have been booby-trapped. "That woman has it out for you," Pete said. "I noticed." "You know what I heard?" He took a sip of his beer. "Linda is trying to sell her house, already. She bought it 8 months ago, and now she has it back on the market. Apparently, she thought this neighborhood was going to be more upscale than it is. She wants to move to one of those gated communities with a golf course and a guard at the entrance." "So why is she making everyone's life miserable?" "Because she is still the HOA president, and miserable people love company. Plus, I think she genuinely believes that if she can force everyone to meet her standards, the property values will jump, and she will make more on the sale." It made a twisted kind of sense. Over the next 2 weeks, 3 more neighbors got violation notices. Someone's mailbox was the wrong shade of black. Someone else had planted flowers in their front yard that were not on the approved list. Another person got dinged for parking their truck in their own driveway because it was a commercial vehicle, even though it just had a small company logo on the door. The neighborhood was getting restless. People were talking, getting angry, but nobody quite knew what to do about it. HOAs had a lot of power, and fighting them usually meant lawyer fees and headaches. The inspection report arrived 10 days after the visit. It was 4 pages long, single-spaced, and listed 17 different violations. Everything from the coop being an attractive nuisance to potential groundwater contamination from chicken waste. None of it was true, and most of it was so ridiculous I would have laughed if I was not so angry. They claimed the structure was not properly permitted. I had the permits from when I built it. They said the chickens were loud enough to constitute a noise violation. I had decibel readings from my phone app proving that a normal conversation was louder. They even claimed the coop was an eyesore that diminished property values, despite it being barely visible from anywhere except my own yard. The board meeting was in 5 days. I prepared a presentation, printed out all my documentation, and even got a statement from my next-door neighbors, an elderly couple named the Johnsons, saying they never had any issues with the chickens and actually enjoyed getting fresh eggs every week. The meeting was held in the Clubhouse, a building at the center of the community that was supposed to be for resident events, but was mostly used for HOA business and the occasional birthday party. I showed up 15 minutes early and found the parking lot already half full. Apparently, word had spread about what was happening, and people wanted to watch. Inside, the main room was set up with a long table at the front where the board members sat. Linda was in the middle, flanked by Deborah and 3 other board members I vaguely recognized. Rows of folding chairs faced them, and about 30 residents were already seated. Pete was there with his wife, Maria. The Johnsons had come. Even some people I had only waved at in passing were in attendance. I realized that this had become about more than just my chickens. This was about Linda's reign of terror, and people wanted to see someone stand up to her. The meeting started with the usual boring stuff. Minutes from the last meeting, financial reports, discussion about repaving a section of sidewalk. Then Linda cleared her throat and looked directly at me. We now move to enforcement actions. Case number 2025-07, violation of Article 7, Section 3. Mr. Davis, you have 5 minutes to present your case. I stood up and walked to the front of the room, setting my folder down on a small podium they had set up. I had practiced this, but my heart was still racing. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I am here because I received a notice to remove my chicken coop, which I built 4 years ago and which has operated without any complaints until recently. I want to address the HOA's concerns and explain why I believe the violation notice is incorrect. I went through my points methodically. The local ordinances that classified backyard chickens as pets, the standards I met for coop construction and bird numbers, the grandfather clause that should have applied if anyone had actually cared about this years ago, the fact that multiple neighbors had provided statements supporting my chickens and confirming there was no nuisance. Linda kept trying to interrupt, but Mark Chen, the compliance officer, kept quietly telling her she had to let me finish. I could see some of the other board members looking uncomfortable, like they had not expected an actual defense. Finally, I said, I want to address the inspection report. It claims 17 violations, but every single one is either factually incorrect or based on a misinterpretation of the rules. I have documentation here proving that the coop was properly permitted, that the noise levels are well within acceptable limits, and that there is no health hazard. I am not running a farm. I am keeping 6 pet chickens in my backyard, which local law explicitly allows. I finished with 30 seconds to spare and returned to my seat. Linda immediately started talking. Thank you, Mr. Davis, for that creative interpretation of the rules. However, the board has reviewed the evidence and consulted with our legal counsel. The bylaws are clear. Farm animals are not permitted, and chickens are farm animals by any reasonable definition. The violation notice stands. You have 15 days remaining to remove the structure and the animals, or fines will begin accruing. I want to call for a board vote, said one of the other board members, a man I did not recognize. This seems like something we should discuss and vote on. Linda's face went red. That is not necessary. This is an enforcement action, not a policy decision. With respect, Linda, I think we should vote. I have read Mr. Davis's documentation and he makes some valid points about the local ordinances. I agree, said another board member, a woman with gray hair. This should be put to a vote. Linda looked like she wanted to argue more, but she was outvoted. The board members huddled together for a moment, whispering. Then they voted. 3 in favor of upholding the violation, 2 against. Linda, Deborah, and 1 other person on Linda's side. 2 votes to dismiss the violation and let me keep my chickens. I had lost, but it was close. And the fact that 2 board members had voted against Linda seemed to shake her. She wrapped up the meeting quickly after that, and people filed out talking in low voices. Pete caught up with me in the parking lot. That was closer than I expected. Close does not win the case. No, but it shows that Linda does not have absolute control. People are starting to push back. I drove home feeling defeated. I had 15 days to figure out what to do. I was not getting rid of my chickens. They were not just egg-producing machines to me. They were pets, each with their own personality. Henrietta was bossy and maternal. Ginger was curious and always the first to investigate anything new. Nugget was skittish but sweet. I had raised them from chicks. They were my responsibility. Over the next few days, I looked into my options. I could ignore the violation and let the fines pile up, then fight it in court. That would take months and probably thousands in legal fees. I could sell my house and move, but the market was not great and I loved this house. I could get rid of the chickens and the coop, comply with Linda's demands, and let her win. None of those options felt right. Then, on a Wednesday morning, I was lying in bed and staring at the ceiling when the idea hit me. It was so simple, so perfectly petty, that I actually laughed out loud. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the HOA bylaws again, searching for the specific language. Article 7, Section 3, prohibited farm animals and structures designed to house them on residential lots. But the community had common areas, undeveloped parcels that belonged to the HOA itself, including a large grassy area right behind the clubhouse that was occasionally used for community events, but was mostly just open space. The rules about common areas were in Article 12. Residents could not build permanent structures on common areas without board approval. But temporary structures for community benefit, approved by at least 1 board member, were allowed for up to 90 days. I had an idea. A gloriously petty, technically legal idea. I spent the morning making phone calls. First, I called Mark Chen, the compliance officer who had seemed reasonable during the inspection. I explained my situation and my idea. To my surprise, he actually laughed. You want to move your chicken coop to the common area behind the clubhouse? Temporarily. The bylaws allow temporary structures for community benefit. I will provide fresh eggs to any resident who wants them. That is a community benefit. And since the coop would not be on my residential lot anymore, it would not violate Article 7. There was a long pause. Linda is going to lose her mind. Is it against the rules? Another pause. No, not technically. You would need approval from a board member and it can only be there for 90 days, but the bylaws do allow it. Would you approve it? Give me 24 hours to think about it. This is going to cause a lot of drama. He called me back the next evening. Okay, I will approve it, but you are responsible for maintaining the structure and the area around it. Any mess, any complaints, and it gets removed immediately. Understood? Understood. Thank you, Mark. Don not thank me yet. Linda is going to make both our lives hell over this. I spent the next weekend preparing. The coop was not exactly mobile, but it was not permanent either. I had built it in sections that could be disassembled. Pete offered to help, and so did 3 other neighbors who had heard what I was planning and thought it was hilarious. We worked on Saturday, taking the coop apart piece by piece, loading it onto a borrowed trailer, and driving it the half-mile through the neighborhood to the clubhouse. The common area behind it was perfect. Flat, grassy, far enough from houses that nobody could complain about noise or smell, but visible. Very visible. Anyone who came to the clubhouse would see it. We spent all day Sunday reassembling it. A small crowd gathered to watch, and the mood was festive. Someone brought lemonade. Someone else ordered pizza. By evening, the coop was standing in its new location, looking even better than before. I had taken the opportunity to add a fresh coat of paint and a little sign that said, "Meadowbrook Community Chicken Coop. Fresh eggs available." The chickens adjusted surprisingly well. I moved them in that evening, and by Monday morning, they were exploring their new run like nothing had changed. I had set up a little free library-style box next to the coop with egg cartons, and a sign explaining that residents could take fresh eggs and leave a donation to help with feed costs. Linda noticed by Monday afternoon. I know this because my phone rang at 3:30, and I could hear the rage in her voice before she even said hello. "What do you think you are doing?" "Hello, Linda. I am at work right now. Can this wait? You moved your illegal chicken coop onto HOA common property. Remove it immediately." It is not illegal. It is a temporary structure for community benefit, approved by a board member, as allowed under Article 12 of the bylaws. I am providing fresh eggs to any resident who wants them. That is not what that rule is for. The rule does not specify what constitutes community benefit. Fresh eggs seem pretty beneficial to me. I am calling an emergency board meeting. This ends now. She hung up. I went back to work, feeling pretty pleased with myself. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening. I showed up ready for a fight, with copies of the bylaws and Mark's written approval for the temporary structure. The clubhouse was even more packed than the last meeting. Apparently, my chicken coop rebellion had become the most exciting thing to happen in Meadowbrook in years. Linda was practically vibrating with anger as she called the meeting to order. "We are here to address an unauthorized structure that has been placed on common property in clear violation of community standards. Mr. Davis has moved his chicken coop, which was already deemed a violation, onto HOA property without proper approval." "I have proper approval," I said, standing up and holding up Mark's written authorization. Board member Mark Chen approved this as a temporary structure for community benefit, which is explicitly allowed under the bylaws. Mark raised his hand. "I did approve it. Mr. Davis met all the requirements, and I saw no reason to deny his request." Linda turned on him. "You did this without consulting the rest of the board. The bylaws do not require full board approval for temporary structures. Any single board member can authorize them. That has been the policy for years. Remember when Deborah approved the bounce house rental for the community picnic? Same rule." Deborah looked uncomfortable. Several other residents were nodding and whispering. The two board members who had voted in my favor before were clearly trying not to smile. "This is different," Linda insisted. "This is not a bounce house for a party. This is a permanent structure." "It is approved for 90 days, Mark said. "That is temporary by definition." The meeting devolved into chaos. Linda tried to call for a vote to override Mark's approval, but the bylaws did not provide for that. She tried to argue that chickens on common property violated different rules, but I had already researched that, and they did not. She even tried to claim that I was trespassing every time I went to tend to the chickens, which was so ridiculous that even Deborah looked skeptical. Finally, one of the other board members, the gray-haired woman who had voted in my favor before, spoke up. "Linda, I think we need to accept that Mr. Davis is operating within the rules. I actually think this is nice for the community." My grandchildren love visiting the chickens, and I have been getting fresh eggs. It is bringing people together. Bringing people together. Linda's voice was getting shrill. It is making us look like some kind of rural farm community. Property values are going to plummet. I think you are being dramatic, the woman said calmly. The meeting ended without any resolution. Linda could not get support to remove the coop, but she also made it clear she was not giving up. She promised to consult with the HOA lawyer and find a way to fix this situation. I left feeling victorious. The coop was staying, at least for 90 days, and in the meantime, something unexpected was happening. People were actually using it. Every morning, the egg cartons in my little box disappeared and were replaced by donations. Residents started stopping by to look at the chickens. Parents brought their kids to learn about where eggs came from. The grassy area behind the clubhouse, which had always been empty, was suddenly becoming a community gathering spot. Pete and Maria started bringing their coffee there in the mornings. The Johnsons started taking daily walks just to check on the chickens. Even people who had never spoken to me before would wave and thank me for the eggs. Linda hated every second of it. I would see her sometimes, watching from the clubhouse windows with an expression like she had been forced to swallow something toxic. Her house was still on the market, and according to Pete, she had dropped the price twice because it was not selling. 2 weeks after the coop moved, I got another letter. This one informed me that the HOA was implementing a new rule, effective immediately, that prohibited any animal-related structures on common property. The rule would be voted on at the next board meeting, but Linda was invoking an emergency powers clause to implement it immediately due to health and safety concerns. I called Mark immediately. Can she do this? Technically, yes. The emergency powers clause is for genuine emergencies, but it is vaguely worded. She could implement it, and then the board would vote to make it permanent at the next meeting. When is the next meeting? 3 weeks. And if the board does not vote to make it permanent, then it expires and things go back to how they were. But Ethan, she only needs 3 votes and she has 3 board members who usually side with her. You are probably going to lose this one. I thanked him and hung up, thinking hard. I had 3 weeks before the vote. 3 weeks to change minds or find another solution. I was not going to just give up. That weekend, I did something I had not done before. I went door to door in the neighborhood, talking to people. I explained the situation, showed them the bylaws, and asked for their support. Most people were sympathetic. Many were dealing with their own HOA harassment from Linda and were happy to help. By Monday, I had a petition with over 60 signatures from residents who wanted the chicken coop to stay. I also had something else. 3 residents who were willing to attend the board meeting and speak in favor of the chickens during the public comment period. But Linda was not sitting idle either. She sent out a mass email to all residents, painting the chicken coop as a health hazard and claiming that the eggs I was providing were not inspected and could make people sick. She cited vague health codes and implied that I was operating an illegal food distribution operation. It was complete nonsense, but it scared some people. I started getting fewer visitors to the coop. The egg box stayed full longer. Parents stopped bringing their kids. I contacted the county health department myself to get ahead of the issue. A very nice inspector came out, looked at my setup, and confirmed in writing that I was not violating any health codes. Backyard chickens were legal, and sharing eggs with neighbors was not considered food distribution requiring inspection. I posted his letter next to my egg box and sent copies to every resident. The tide started to turn back in my favor. People realized Linda was making things up, and that made them angry. The neighborhood Facebook group, which I barely used, lit up with arguments. People took sides. It stopped being about chickens and became about whether Linda had too much power and was abusing her position. Things got weirder. One morning I came to feed the chickens and found that someone had put up caution tape around the coop, the kind you see at crime scenes. I took it down. The next day, there was a sign that said "Danger. Biohazard stuck in the ground nearby." I removed that too. Linda was escalating, but she was also getting sloppy. She sent another mass email claiming that the chickens were attracting rats. 3 different residents immediately replied with photos showing that the only wildlife in the area were the usual squirrels and birds that had always been there. One person pointed out that the HOA's own dumpster area near the clubhouse was a much more likely rat attractant than my well-maintained coop. The day before the board meeting, something happened that changed everything. I got a call from Mark Chen, and he sounded worried. "Ethan, you need to check on your chickens. I just got a call from a resident who said something looks wrong." I was at work, but I left immediately, making the 15-minute drive in 10. When I got to the clubhouse, I found a small crowd gathered around the coop. My stomach dropped. The gate to the run was open. All 6 chickens were gone. I felt sick. These were my birds. I had raised them, taken care of them, and now they were missing. I looked around frantically, checking the nearby bushes and under the deck of the clubhouse. What happened? I asked the residents who were standing there. An older man I recognized but did not know well spoke up. "I was walking my dog about an hour ago and saw the gate standing open. I did not see any chickens. I called Mark right away." I spent the next 2 hours searching. Pete came to help, and so did a dozen other residents. We combed the area, checked nearby yards, and asked everyone we saw if they had seen chickens wandering around. Nothing. Finally, as the sun was starting to set, I sat down on the grass near the empty coop, feeling defeated. This was not about the HOA anymore. This was about living creatures that depended on me, and I had failed them. Maria came over with her phone in her hand. "Ethan, you need to see this." She showed me the neighborhood Facebook group. Someone had posted a video from their home security camera. The footage was from that morning, showing the area behind the clubhouse. At 8:15 in the morning, a figure approached the coop. The video quality was not great, but the person was clearly wearing a gray tracksuit and had blonde hair cut in a familiar style. Linda. The video showed her opening the gate, going inside the run, and then leaving. The angle did not show what happened to the chickens, but it was clear that she had been there and had deliberately opened the gate. I felt rage building in my chest. She let them out. She did this on purpose. "Keep watching," Maria said. The video continued. About 10 minutes after Linda left, another figure appeared. This person was carrying something large, a box or crate. They went to the coop, spent several minutes inside, and then left carrying the crate, which now appeared heavier. The second person was harder to identify because they were wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses, but they walked to a car parked on the street. The license plate was partially visible. "Can you read that plate?" I asked. Pete squinted at the screen. "Looks like DHW and then maybe 423. "That enough to report? We are calling the police," I said. "This is theft. She stole my property." We went to the clubhouse and I called the non-emergency police line. I explained the situation and they said they would send an officer. While we waited, more residents showed up, having seen the Facebook video. People were angry now. This had crossed a line from HOA petness into actual criminal behavior. The police officer who arrived was a young woman named Officer Martinez. She took my statement, watched the video, and examined the coop. She was professional and thorough, asking questions and taking notes. "So these chickens, they are your personal property?" she asked. "Yes." I have receipts from when I bought them as chicks, vaccination records, everything. They are pets. And this woman, Linda Pemberton, she is the HOA president? Yes. And you are saying she stole them because of a dispute over HOA rules. That is what it looks like. Officer Martinez looked at the video again. Okay. This is technically theft, though I am going to be honest with you. 6 chickens is a weird case, but we can follow up. The second person in the video, any idea who that might be? No idea, but that license plate should tell you. She nodded and said she would investigate. She took the video file and left, promising to follow up within a few days. I went home that night feeling hollow. The chickens were gone. Even if the police found them, there was no guarantee they would be okay. Chickens are fragile. Stress can kill them. They need proper food and water and shelter. Who knew what conditions they were in now? The next morning was the board meeting. I almost did not go. What was the point? But Pete convinced me that I needed to be there, needed to confront Linda publicly with what she had done. The clubhouse was packed. It seemed like half the neighborhood had shown up. People were standing along the walls because all the seats were full. Linda was at the front table with the other board members, and when I walked in, her face went pale. The meeting started with normal business, but you could feel the tension in the room. Finally, Linda got to the agenda item about the new rule prohibiting animals on common property. Before she could say more than a sentence, I stood up. Point of order. Before we discuss this rule, I need to address something that happened yesterday. Linda looked flustered. This is not the time for public comment. My 6 chickens were stolen yesterday. There is video evidence showing you, Linda, opening the gate to the coop. Then another person, unknown, removed my chickens. I have filed a police report. This is theft and you are involved. The room erupted. Everyone started talking at once. Linda was shaking her head, looking around wildly. That is ridiculous. I did not steal anything. I was checking on the coop because I had received complaints about the gate not being properly secured. I was ensuring the safety of the animals. By opening the gate and letting them out, I closed the gate when I left. If someone else came after me, that is not my fault. Mark Chen spoke up from his seat at the board table. Linda, the video pretty clearly shows you opening the gate. Why would you do that if you were checking security? I was testing it, making sure it latched properly. It was a weak excuse and everyone knew it. But proving conspiracy would be harder. The video showed her opening the gate but not actually taking the chickens. That was the second person. One of the residents in the audience stood up. I know who the second person is. That is Linda's sister, Brenda. She drives a silver Honda Accord, license plate DHW 423. I have seen her visiting Linda multiple times. Linda's face went from pale to red. This is all speculation. You cannot prove anything. The police can, I said. They have the license plate. They will be talking to your sister. The meeting fell apart after that. The board could not focus on anything else. People were shouting questions at Linda, demanding answers. Finally, Mark made a motion to table the vote on the animal rule until the police investigation was complete. It passed 4-1, with only Linda voting against it. Linda tried to maintain control, but she had lost the room. People were openly calling for her resignation. Someone started a recall petition right there, passing around a sheet of paper to gather signatures. By the end of the meeting, they had over 40 names. I left feeling slightly better. At least Linda was facing consequences. But I still did not have my chickens back. 3 days later, Officer Martinez called me. We found your chickens. All 6 are alive and appear healthy. They were at a property in Gastonia, being kept in a shed. The owner of the property claims she was just holding them temporarily for her sister and had no idea they were stolen. We are still investigating. Can I get them back? Yes. You can pick them up at the county animal services facility. They have been checked by a vet and cleared. I drove to Gastonia that afternoon with Pete. The animal services building was a low concrete structure that smelled like disinfectant and dog food. A worker led me to a back room where my chickens were in a large cage, looking confused but unhurt. Henrietta saw me and made her distinctive brrrp sound, the one she used when she wanted treats. I felt relief wash over me. Hey, girls, let us get you home. We loaded them into carriers and drove back to Meadowbrook. The coop was still standing behind the clubhouse, and I settled the chickens back into their home. They immediately went to their favorite roosting spots, like they had never left. Word spread quickly that the chickens were back. People stopped by all evening to see them and congratulate me. Someone brought a welcome home banner that they hung on the clubhouse. It was silly and sweet and made me feel like this neighborhood might actually be worth fighting for. The next week was a whirlwind. Officer Martinez called again to let me know that charges were being filed. Linda's sister Brenda had confessed to taking the chickens, claiming Linda had told her they were abandoned and needed rescuing. Linda was being charged as an accomplice to theft. They were both facing misdemeanor charges, fines, and possible community service. The HOA board held an emergency meeting without Linda present. Mark Chen was acting president. They voted unanimously to suspend Linda's authority pending the outcome of the criminal case, and to allow me to keep the chicken coop on common property indefinitely, changing the temporary approval to permanent. Linda's house sold 2 weeks later, well below asking price. I heard she was moving to Florida. I never saw her again after that board meeting. Brenda took a plea deal. She paid restitution, got 6 months of probation, and had to do 100 hours of community service. Linda fought the charges, but security footage and phone records showed she had coordinated the theft. She was convicted and got a similar sentence. Plus, she was permanently banned from serving on any HOA board in the state, which was apparently a thing that could happen. The neighborhood slowly returned to normal, but things had changed. People were more involved now, more aware of what the HOA was doing. Attendance at board meetings stayed high. The recall petition eventually gathered enough signatures, and new elections were held. Mark Chen became president officially, and 2 new board members were elected, both of them residents who had supported me during the chicken coop fight. The coop became a permanent fixture of the community. Residents took turns helping me maintain it and feed the chickens when I traveled. The egg donations funded a scholarship fund for neighborhood kids. Someone built a little bench nearby so people could sit and watch the birds. My favorite moment came about 6 months after everything settled down. I was at the coop early one morning collecting eggs and refilling water when a family I did not recognize walked up. They had a young girl, maybe 7 years old, who was staring at the chickens with wide eyes. "Are you Mr. Davis?" the father asked. "That is me. We just moved in 2 streets over. Our daughter has been asking to see the famous chickens ever since we got here. The neighbors told us all about what happened." The little girl stepped closer to the fence, watching Henrietta scratch in the dirt. "Can I feed them?" I handed her some mealworms, showed her how to toss them through the fence. The chickens came running and she laughed with pure delight. "This is really nice," the mother said. When we were looking at houses, the realtor mentioned this as a selling point, the community chicken coop. She said it showed that this was a neighborhood where people cared about each other and did not let petty rules get in the way of what matters. I felt proud hearing that. What had started as a fight against an overzealous HOA president had turned into something bigger. Something that brought people together. I still live in Meadowbrook. The chickens are older now, laying fewer eggs but still enjoying their days in the sun behind the clubhouse. I built a second coop next to the first one and got some younger hens, and I am teaching a few neighborhood kids how to care for them, hoping to pass on the responsibility someday. The HOA still exists, but it is different now. Mark runs it with actual common sense. They focus on maintaining the community amenities, keeping the streets safe, and helping neighbors connect. No more harassment letters. No more surprise inspections looking for violations. Sometimes I think about Linda and wonder if she ever understood what she did wrong. Probably not. People like that rarely do. They see rules as power instead of tools for making things better. They would rather tear things down than build something that brings joy. But I learned something important through all of this. Communities are what we make them. If we let small-minded people control everything, we get misery. But if we stand up, if we push back against nonsense, if we find creative solutions to stupid problems, we can create something worth having. And sometimes, the best revenge is not revenge at all. It is building something so good, so positive, that it makes the person who tried to tear you down completely irrelevant. My chicken coop is still there, right behind the clubhouse where Linda used to reign. Every morning, the hens wake up and start their day, laying eggs, taking dust baths, and living their simple chicken lives. And every morning, neighbors stop by to say hello, collect breakfast, and spend a few minutes in this little pocket of peace we created together. Linda wanted me to get rid of my chickens because they did not fit her vision of what the neighborhood should be. Instead, the chickens became the heart of the neighborhood, bringing people together in ways she never could. That clubhouse she was so proud of, the symbol of her HOA authority, now looks out onto a chicken coop that represents everything she hated: community, kindness, and the idea that sometimes the rules need to bend to accommodate what actually matters. I won that fight not by being louder or meaner or more stubborn than Linda, though maybe I was all those things. I won because I was right, and because I found other people who were tired of being pushed around by someone on a power trip. Together we proved that even an HOA, that infamous symbol of suburban tyranny, can be reformed if enough people care. The chickens, oblivious to all the drama they caused, continue to rule their little kingdom behind the clubhouse. Henrietta is still the boss, even in her old age. Ginger still investigates everything. Nugget is still nervous. And every day they produce eggs that feed my neighbors and remind everyone who sees them that sometimes the best response to someone telling you no is to find a way to turn that no into something even better than what you originally had. My chicken coop sits exactly where I moved it during the height of the battle with Linda. Right there in plain sight, impossible to ignore, a testament to the fact that petty tyrants can be defeated and that communities can choose kindness over control. The HOA demanded I remove it from my property, and I did. I moved it closer to their clubhouse, and in doing so, I turned their seat of power into a daily reminder that they do not own us. We own them. They exist to serve the community, not rule it. Every time I walk past that clubhouse on my way to tend my birds, I smile. This is my neighborhood now. Ours. And nobody is going to take that away with a threatening letter and an inflated sense of authority ever again.